You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks. I'm your host, Mark Newbold, and today we go to a very special Star Wars Visions Roundtable where we had the chance to sit down with executive producer James Waugh and producer Kanako Shirasaki to talk about this groundbreaking 9-episode anime series now streaming on Disney+. Myself, other podcasts and websites, put some questions to the guys. So sit back and enjoy this half-hour Star Wars Visions Roundtable, brought to you by Fantha Tracks. First question asked, blending the worlds of anime and Star Wars, how difficult was that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in truth it was actually pretty seamless. And what I mean by that is so much of Star Wars is influenced by a similar cinematic language as anime, and a lot of that is Kurosawa and Jadaigeki films and you know, a lot of Japanese cinema. And so I think in many ways these things really harmonize, and to that point, I think we've been inspired by anime for a long time. I don't think it's any secret that a lot of our work, it's very clear that, you know, there's a deep love for Japanese animation at Lucasfilm. There has been for a long time, George included. And so I think, you know, it was not the challenge was really more about excavating the Star Wars heart and soul, and making sure that when we say what is anime, each of these stories and each of these studios really have a different tone and a different feel. And, you know, it really hopefully paints like the broad swath of like all the diversity you get with anime. So it's really just finding the heart and soul of each one of these stories and helping these creators tell the best Star Wars story that was as authentic as possible. But, you know, at its core, I think the imaginative world building of Star Wars is very similar to what anime creators are doing. And the very visual cinematic language and action sequences that anime is known for is very similar to what George was doing, and we've carried forward in current Star Wars storytelling.
I agree, because it's all the creators are hugely influenced by Star Wars. So, and then they love Star Wars so much. So when we're talking about the story and ideas, like they know what they want to do, and then they know what's the essence of the Star Wars universe. So yeah, so it's pretty seamless. And it was very interesting. We have a very great conversation, go back and forth between the studios in the production.
Yeah, and they were all, I mean, that's a good point, Kanako. Like literally every conversation we'd sit down and I felt, you know, a kindred spirits, because the conversation usually started with the director talking about, oh, I saw, you know, Star Wars in 1977 in the theater, or I saw Phantom Menace in the theater in 1999, and it changed my life. And I realized I wanted to do that too, and I wanted to create worlds like that. And you know, it's that moment of like, oh yeah, I know that feeling, you know, and everybody that I think, you know, touches Star Wars knows that feeling.
Hi, this is Guy Henry, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. Enjoy.
The next question asked if there was anything in the Star Wars mythology that the creators, directors, producers, writers felt would work well in anime.
That's tricky in the sense that I don't think there's one specific story. I think a lot of these different stories tell mythic Star Wars stories that fit anywhere within Star Wars storytelling. A good example is The Elder. It is masters and student stories, or as Star Wars as it gets, and understand of passing back the knowledge and having to train as Star Wars as it gets, and you know, seeing the difference in generations. On the other hand, something like a Tatooine Rhapsody is a story about a dreamer and found family That's Luke Skywalker. He's a dreamer who finds a family, and same as, it's Rebels. That, so all of these stories have human stories. Toby one is a story about, it's a Pinocchio story. It's a boy that wants to grow up, a droid that wants to grow up and be a real Jedi. So they're all mythic is the truth. And I think that's why they're authentic Star Wars stories. We approach it from that place first. What is the basic? And look, we have the benefit of working with people like Dave Filoni and the people who have been here a long time and have passed on their knowledge. So we get to pay it back, pay it forward.
Understanding that these stories don't fit into regular canon, what were the guidelines for the writers and creators of Star Wars Visions?
So it was very open to, and we asked them to please explore your imagination and tell your perspective and then tell your own story in Star Wars Galaxy. And that's how we see, that's the idea we received. So we were fortunate that every single director gave us very distinctive ideas and perspective and their interpretation of Star Wars stories.
Yeah, we wanted it to be a celebration of Star Wars anime. Really, we whether if they wanted their stories to fit more on the timeline, like something like a Tatooine Rhapsody, we worked with them to help them make it feel like it's plausible and could fit into that. But we didn't want to lead from that place. We didn't want them to try to tell stories that were going to define core Star Wars fiction. We wanted to really let them tell their stories and create new characters. And, certain stories like a Tatooine Rhapsody has a Boba Fett and a Jabba, but really they earn those characters, and Bib, they earn those characters because their characters are so good. And it kind of warrants leveraging these other characters. But no, it was very free.
Hi, Paul Blake here, Greedo from Star Wars A New Hope, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Evening, morning, hello everyone. It's a question for both of you. What instigated your decision to go all in on a Japanese anime style show like Visions? And slightly further to that, could that lead to other shows designed in a similar fashion around other cultures or other genres? If this is a success, have you kind of opened the doors to something special?
Passion, love of the medium. It truly was that. I mean, I this certainly wasn't a cynical anime is popular. This was, we love anime, and we were looking for ways to do that. And like I said before, we didn't really know how to do that in this sort of world, in a very feature driven world. But when Disney Plus became Disney Plus, and we saw that opportunity coming, and it was a whole new platform, we realized we could explore different types of storytelling and lean into anime, which is something we loved. It just happens to be a growing form, I think, because people are discovering what artistry is there. Will this beget further future anime things? I mean, let's see the reaction. I'm hoping people love it as much as Kanako and I do, and we'll know more hopefully next week.
The next question asked about some of the obvious influences on Star Wars Visions, but also asked about some of the less well-known influences that helped shape the show.
Yeah, I would. I just because you mentioned Dave, I'll riff a second. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work with him over the last number of years. Not as much as I would love, but I have learned a lot. And what I have learned from him is that he focuses on what's a story you could tell, or what I've found is he focuses on a story of what could you tell without the Star Wars first? What's a relatable human story? And then from there, we can look at what makes it Star Wars and how do you layer on the Star Wars. The other thing he talks about a lot, and I think you see in this, is genre films and, what were the influences of Star Wars. And Kanako, I'm sure you could speak to this more too, but each of these studios are pretty steeped in cinematic verbiage. They've seen all the films, and so they had a point of view, and hopefully you can see that in Akakiri and The Duel, and you can probably reference those films that they're riffing off of.
Yeah, I think each director's, they are super excited working on this Star Wars project. At the same time, they didn't really overwhelmed by like you have to make a Star Wars story. I think they bring their very unique perspective to each short. Like Village Bride, like director want to bring the ritual, like a more like a Japanese like animism type of concept to the story. And Tatooine Rhapsody, the director Kimura, like he's really young and he wanted to bring this like a rock band concept. So they're not shy about bringing their own perspective and what they really want to tell on the Star Wars platform. So I think that's also another reason why it's worked pretty well, I think.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark fanthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
The next question asked about the sound and the music of Star Wars, how to make Star Wars Visions still feel and sound like a Star Wars project, and also about putting the soundtrack out as a physical and digital download release.
Go ahead, Kanako, you should. Yeah.
Oh, sure. So I'm glad you brought up the music and the sound. So music, like we didn't ask studio to like you have to find these type of composers. They went to find like a best composer works for their short. Some of the shorts like Village Bride and like a duo like explore the combination of orchestra and Japanese traditional music. The Ninth Jedi as like the two composer units are heavily inspired from John Williams. So they are like entire music is like an homage to John Williams. And like Akakiri, the sound is like from the by a composer called Yuzan, and he's a Japanese and he plays the Indian drum called tabla, which adds very interesting perspective to the Star Wars music. For the sound perspective, all the lightsaber sound you hear is from the Lucasfilm sound library. So it's authentic lightsaber sound, as he might have noticed. And some of the shorts did the sound mixing session with Skywalker sound. So that's also enhanced authenticity in a way. And yeah, I'm sure you will find like, lots of interesting findings as you repeatedly watch the short, and I hope you enjoy that.
The next question referred to the American voice actors used in the show and whether any of the characters were tailored to match those American voices or whether those actors added their voices to the already pre-recorded Japanese versions of Star Wars Visions and it was done in that order.
No, I mean, our whole development and production philosophy on this was we wanted to really ensure authentic Japanese anime. And what I mean by that is we let the studios cast a original cast first, a Japanese cast. This is the sub versus dub debate you hear often in the anime community. But that rendered the initial expression. What we ended up doing is knowing that we wanted to make this as accessible as possible, and we wanted to give people the option for the authentic original experience, but also have a version that was for people who didn't want to read the movie or experience it in another language. And so we did what has been done with Miyazaki films and a ton of anime is dub it. And so, no, none of the characters were created with specific actors in mind. What I will say is that, actors are artists and they have their own renditions of characters, and they read characters in a different, in their own kind of way, director regardless. And like they have their own, you want to lean into their talent. And so some of the English actors express the characters slightly different. In a more a different way than you would see in the Japanese version, and it's really cool to see. Frankly, it's but none of them were created for these actors. I think what's exciting is a lot of these actors joined the project because they loved Star Wars and just as much they loved anime.
The next question was put to producer James Waugh, and the question was asking whether or not Star Wars Visions was different to other Star Wars projects he'd worked on, and how?
No, I mean that's a really good question. Again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. You approach these stories, I think, from what's a good story and who's the creator and how do you help the creator realize their vision. We're not addicted. We don't really dictate at this company. We're not prescriptive. We believe in talent, and I think our goal is always to make sure that talent storytelling is as best as it could possibly be, and we work with them. No matter the medium, every medium has a different kind of form and challenge. I think the thing that was a little different with this expression or this project in particular is the visions framework, is the idea of, it's sometimes when you're dealing more with core fiction, it's okay, what part of the timeline are we on? How do we make this work so that the context of that era facilitates a story, and it's a dialogue in that regard. We got there with some of these stories, but that wasn't what led it. It was we wanted to let these creators just explore anything that was exciting to them and influenced them over 40 years of Star Wars storytelling. So there were creators that said, my Star Wars was Knights of the Old Republic. Oh, wow, that really blew me away. I want to use elements of that. Okay, that's totally fine. And there were creators that wanted to stay more in the pocket of kind of traditional, the original trilogy. So it was really more of from that perspective. I think that was the difference. Really, is it wasn't so. It didn't. The timeline art discussion didn't frame the context. It was lean into the animation first. What do you want to say? What do you want to do? And then we'll see how we can adjust. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It always comes down to what's a good story? What is the story trying to say?
Hi, this is Gareth Edwards, director of the best standalone Star Wars film since Caravan of Courage, called Rogue One. You're listening to Panther Tracks. Enjoy.
The next question was asking about the music for Tatooine Rhapsody and how that entire episode, and specifically its music, came together.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so I think the director wanted to do some 70s garage band feeling. So I think what they had in mind was The Crash. I forgot the exact song, but so he wanted to recreate that feeling. I think they nailed it.
Very Ramonesy. It's super.
Yeah, Ramones. Sorry. Yeah.
Very super cool. Well, both versions are cool. So this is another watch the sub and the dub, because the sub definitely has the original sort of Japanese version. But one of the things that was super exciting was Joseph Gordon-Levitt loved the short, and part of what he was excited about doing was to sing that song and to do his version of that song in the end. It's the same song, but man, he sang his heart out. That was the coolest VO session I think I've ever experienced, because it was just watching him, just fall in love with it and rock. So yeah, I agree with you. It's super catchy.
The next question asked our guests which episode of the 9 Star Wars Visions episodes resonated with them the most.
I like the way you... Oh, Kanako, I'm giving it to you. I'll give you more time to...
Whenever I watch any movies, and I want to imagine what's the other characters doing behind this a main story. So from that perspective, I really love watching The Village Bride. They introduce the lives and different ritual of the people living the planet Kelia, and I was really fascinated by all the designs. So yeah, I love watching that short from that perspective. Yeah, it's definitely hard to pick the favorite. So thanks for that question.
Yes, thank you for phrasing it that way. They're also different, and that's part of the charm of the way we partner with these studios, is that we pick them because they're different. So I have different favorites for different reasons. What resonates with me the most? I don't know. I would say Tatooine Rhapsody because of the song, obviously, but it's also was one of those breakthrough moments in the production of. We got this all started with a couple paragraphs right? It was like a paragraph on a white paper. You didn't really get a sense of what the storytelling what it was going to look like. And I just remembered reading their intention that they wanted to do a rock opera. And I really wasn't sure about that. And they did have one little sketch of the kind of chibi design of Boba Fett. And it was one of those moments where I was just like, I don't know if this is Visions. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, like, no, that, we're talking people like Josh Rhimes and other people at Lucasfilm who were part of the project, maybe this is what Visions is. Maybe it is about taking leaps and when you can have a rock song in the end. And so I'm glad I got on board because I think that short really speaks to me in the end.
Similar question to Chris's, but hopefully from a slightly different angle. There's a very specific vocal style and delivery in Japanese animation. So did that have any bearing on the American voice talent that you chose for the show? And just briefly on Tatooine Rhapsody, whoever decided to call the bass player Guy after Geezer Butler in Black Sabbath is a genius. I just had to say it.
That's a great Easter egg of sorts. I don't know. I don't. I mean, Kanako, were you? I don't. I mean, when it came to the English dub, I don't really think that was necessarily. We didn't have that concern, Mark. It wasn't. We weren't casting for that. I think to the answer earlier, each of these actors sort of embodied the character in their own way. They did see the original, and I think obviously they were very influenced by that. But I think they also. They all have their own thing that they do, and they brought that to it.
My name is Ingrid Geiler. I played Princess Leia in Rogue One, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
The next question mentions some of the similarities between the various episodes, and obviously the differences in visual style. But did Lucasfilm have to work on making sure that each of the episodes was very much its own thing?
It happens organically. We were so lucky when we received all the pitches. They're different and distinctive. Every single one was unique.
Yeah, and I think where they do overlap, it's because they get Star Wars. I mean, we're also kind of talking about the same things that appeal to us about this franchise. And it's not to say that it won't evolve and there's not other interesting things that can be done, but like the heart and soul of the storytelling is so rooted in the Star Wars that we all know and love. And I think that was the same for these creators, so those mythic themes is what they kept coming back to. Hopefully they're expressed in enough different variety that it's not one note. But I think some of those similarities are because it's Star Wars and they're authentic stories.
The next question asked about the possibility of a Disney Gallery The Mandalorian style episode looking at each of these 9 Star Wars Visions episodes.
That's a great idea, Lillian. Maybe that's a good idea. I mean, it was tricky in the sense that like we're in the midst of COVID, so getting a ton of footage isn't easy. But everybody document. Yeah, I mean. It's a great idea. There's a lot of interesting creators involved with this.
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks. Well done.
The final question for today asked about the length of each of the episodes and how they were all fairly similar in length. Was that a predetermined thing, or were they organically made to be the length that they ended up being?
I think we had a range, but we broke our rules. So I think initially we were looking at, and Kanako, check my memory on this, but I think we were like minutes.
Yeah, we were talking about like target is like 12 minutes, 15 minutes, and then some of the shorts is like, if we want to do more, so become a little longer than that.
Yeah, like The Ninth Jedi is a good example of that. They actually. I don't think this is too revealing, but they had 2 stories that were kind of taking place in the same that were loosely connected. It was very clear they had a whole mythos built in their mind, and they had 2 shorts that in a way connected to each other, and they were different proposals. And we realized we should put these together and let you tell your full story. Don't be constrained by the time, and we figured out how to make it work.
Thanks for listening to this special episode of Making Tracks from the Star Wars Visions Roundtable. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fantatracks.com or check out the free Fantatracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fantatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds @Fantatracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fantatracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune into our weekly Fantatracks news show, Good Morning Tatooine, live Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And we'll see you next week on the next episode of Making Tracks.
Coming up next on Fantatracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.